It's time for Herd Mentality, the weekly episode where you control the discussion today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino from the Draft Network, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Happy Wednesday to you, and thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, or if you're joining us on the YouTube channel, your first watch every day. This Mother's Day, give mom something she'll treasure forever with fine jewelry from BlueNile.com, and Locked On Sports listeners get $50 off $500. Use code Locked On at checkout. As you know, it's Herd Mentality. I'm going to dive into your questions that were submitted. We have a ton of great ones to get into, so let's get started. A lot of this is going to be draft focused today, which I love. It's the relevant thing that's recently happened for the Buffalo Bills, and I know you have a lot of questions about the draft, and while I have broken down all of the players the Bills drafted at this point, there's still a lot of great follow-ups that I want to get to here today. First one comes from Kevin, who says, being explained yesterday that they traded back from 57 and 60 because 0 of the 5 players they were targeting were off the board. By pick 63, one of those players was taken. Picks 60 through 62, Cam Taylor-Britt, Drake Jackson, Brian Cook. Assuming they were looking at the secondary players, do you have any speculation on their thought process after they drafted Elam in round 1? Back-to-back cornerbacks feels like they both would have major roles in the defense, or does this tip anything about the looming Poyer decision? It's a fun question, and I've certainly paid attention to all the comments that Brandon Beane has made coming out of this draft. And my speculation is that the player that got drafted that was a target was Cam Taylor-Britt, the cornerback from Nebraska. And I don't believe the Bills intended on picking back-to-back corners. I don't think that was their plan. I do think that the plan was adjusted when Kaiir Elam was available for the Bills in the first round. And because of that, they went in a different direction. They went ahead and traded up a little bit and got Kaiir Elam and came back and picked a running back in the second round. I think it's safe to assume that had Kaiir Elam not gotten to the Bills, they would have drafted Breece Hall, the running back from Iowa State, and then came back in the second round and drafted Cam Taylor-Britt, the cornerback from Nebraska. That's honestly what I would come away with as my takeaway by dissecting these comments and thinking about what actually played out. I do think that plan A might have been Breece Hall, Cam Taylor-Britt, but because Kaiir Elam got down the board, Brandon Beane did the smart thing. He valued the corner over the running back, went ahead and got himself a Kaiir Elam in the first round and the running back in the second round. Next one comes from Doug, who says, hypothetically, if the Bills drafted Khalil Shakir at 89 and Terrell Bernard in the 5th round, would you feel better about the value the Bills got in the draft? Do you think the lack of an early draft pick on the offensive line shows that the Bills feel comfortable with their current line depth? Should they be comfortable? And how bad was the Patriots draft? As for the Patriots draft, head scratcher after head scratcher after head scratcher. Bill Belichick's a bad GM. He's not been good at GMing for years. Draft picks, free agent moves, trades, he does a bad job. As for the flipping of the picks, 89 for Shakir and 5th round for Terrell Bernard, I'd love it. I think if you do that, the Bills got great value at every pick, and really the only pick I questioned was Terrell Bernard in the 3rd round. I thought everything else was pretty appropriate. And then as for the offensive line depth, absolutely, and this is something I've talked about on the podcast, where this year's offensive line depth is not a concern at all. You have the 5 starters, and behind the 5 starters, you've got David Quessenberry. You've got Ike Bacher. You've got Cody Ford. You got Greg Manns. You got Tommy Doyle. I mean, that's not even including Luke Tenuta, who the Bills just drafted, or Bobby Hart. I mean, the Bills are really set, in my opinion, when it comes to offensive line depth. So they should feel comfortable with it. My concerns with the offensive line really stem from beyond this season, where I think they're going to have to replace Roger Saffold next offseason. And to get a player this year that you could start grooming to be the replacement on a cost control rookie deal made sense to me. I know the Bills were targeting some offensive linemen, but I don't think it really worked out where the value was appropriate for them based on what they, the opportunity cost of picking a player at a different position. Next one comes from Chris, who says, first off, big thanks to you for your tenacity and dedication in bringing high-quality draft content to Bills Mafia. My pleasure, Chris. In the theme of post-draft analysis, can you do the same for you? And he asked me 3 good questions here, more about me and my process scouting players. He said, what will you sustain from this draft going forward? What do you need to change and improve on for next year's draft? And how have you grown in this draft? 3 fun questions. Let me answer them. What will you sustain from this draft going forward? What will you sustain from this draft going forward? Things you did well. I think I did a very good job of trusting my own instincts on player evaluation and not let the outside noise creep in. I think this year, as much as any year, maybe even better than past years, I was laser focused on my own personal opinions and beliefs on the players. Didn't care about the outside noise, didn't care about projections or other people's draft boards or scouting takes. It was me, it was authentic, and I think I did a great job of that this year, and I look forward to that being a staple of my process moving forward. Number 2 was, what do you need to change and improve on for next year's draft? To me, the answer to this question is focus on the elevator pitch when it comes to prospects. Focus on the elevator pitch. What does that mean? Well, if you look at my evaluations on prospects, I write a summary, which is 200-300 words, and then I do 10 different trait by trait analysis for each position. And I really extrapolate the traits. But while all of that is useful, and I love our process, sometimes it is as simple as taking what you write in 700, 800, 1,000 words for some players and reducing it down to one sentence. How do I explain a prospect in one sentence? And sometimes that gives you all of your answers. For example, a player like Isaiah Spiller, running back, Texas A&M, a player that I love. He's going to be a steal for the Chargers at pick 123 overall. I could tell you all about his contact balance and his vision and how good he is in condensed areas of the field and his power and how balanced of a skill set he offers. But why did he go at pick 123 if I thought he was the best running back in the class? Well, go back to the elevator pitch. The elevator pitch would be Isaiah Spiller is a wonderful blend of vision and contact balance, but he lacks explosive athleticism and has some fumbling issues. All right. So I just took a 1,000-word scouting report and I condensed it to one sentence. And in that one sentence, 2 things really stand out. Doesn't have great athleticism, has some fumbling issues. So when you ask me what I need to change and improve on for next year's draft, it's sometimes focusing on that elevator pitch a little bit more to get a better feel for where players are going to get drafted. Now, I don't care that Isaiah Spiller was a 4th-round pick and he was my first running back on my rankings. I don't care about that at all. We'll revisit that in 3 years. But as for really understanding why certain players go in certain ranges, I think that's really helpful. And as a draft analyst, you wear 2 hats. One is your evaluator hat, where it's all about how you evaluate the players. The other is the forecaster hat, where you start to project where players are going to go predictively based on what the NFL typically does. They're 2 different hats. And so I think that's important to be mindful of when you talk about the draft and how people analyze the draft. They're 2 completely different things. You look at a player like Justin Ross. Let's go back to the elevator pitch. Justin Ross, Clemson wide receiver, had the big year a couple of seasons ago, but since he's had neck issues or some type of back issue, very concerning. And on tape, you don't see a great separator. So you could say something along the lines of Clemson wide receiver Justin Ross had great production early in his career, but injuries and lack of ability to separate are concerning components of evaluation. And then when you look at it like that, you're not surprised the guy went undrafted. So that's probably a way too long answer here, but focus on the elevator pitch is something that I want to do an even better job of for next year's draft. And then the last one from Chris was, how have you grown in this draft? And I think my answer there is I'm really proud of how I managed my efforts to scout this draft class. There was no crunch. I paced myself extremely well, and I paced myself while writing a book. And I think I really hit my stride with time management and how to attack my days so that I can be effective with all the things that I need to do on a daily basis and never feel like I'm in a crunch whatsoever. So thanks for those questions, Chris. I enjoyed that one. eMart86 says, was hoping you could talk on herd mentality about why you think the Bills took Terrell Bernard over Dylan Parham. Interior offensive line depth is pretty glaring concern, and listening to you talk about Parham, 89 seemed like great value. Are they planning on just addressing this next year? Hope this isn't another Creed Humphrey situation. Touche. You guys know I love Dylan Parham. I'd pick him in the top 50. He goes 89 overall. I think he's going to be a really outstanding starter. I think he went to the Raiders. Great pick. Great pick. So, yeah, would I rather have had Parham over Bernard? You betcha. There's no doubt about it. But I think the Bills are a lot more comfortable with their interior offensive line depth right now than maybe some fans are. And I talked about that, a couple answers ago, where I think they're in good shape with interior offensive line depth. The key is going to be how it evolves in future years. And I think Brandon Beane continues to answer that question. He's going to sign veterans. He's going to continue to prioritize it. And there will be interior offensive line depth. I think the real concern is they need a starter next year to replace Roger Saffold. Whether she prefers a statement piece or everyday subtle elegance, BlueNile.com has fine jewelry options for every mom. Shop high-quality classic diamond earrings, elegant tennis bracelets, or gemstone pendant necklaces. Looking for fine jewelry but having trouble choosing? Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7, available via phone or chat to help you find a memorable gift at every budget. Celebrating the special women in your life? On BlueNile.com, you can easily navigate thousands of fine jewelry options at every price point. This Mother's Day, give mom something she'll treasure forever with fine jewelry from BlueNile.com. And Locked On Sports listeners get $50 off a purchase of $500. This podcast exclusive is only good through Mother's Day. Use code Locked On. That's code Locked On. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever peace. Go to BlueNile.com today. No business owner wants to deal with the hassle of energy decisions. You just want your business to run smoothly and pay a fair price for power. But coming off the back of one of the highest price winners in the last decade, if your business was on a purely variable or market rate, you paid out the nose. Many New York business owners switched suppliers out of frustration, but unless they chose alternative pricing options, they're still at risk for a January repeat. Catalyst Power partners with you or your trusted energy consultant to produce a power supply plan that fits your business and your market risk tolerance. We have a suite of options customizable to fit your business's needs, including options that bundle with or focus on renewable energy. Right now in New York, we're offering an on-site solar solution for your business that requires zero installation, maintenance, or material purchase costs. That's right, no CapEx costs for you. To sweeten the deal, qualified businesses could be eligible for up to 6 months of at-cost energy supply from Catalyst Power. Go to catalystpower.com/lockedonbills to learn more. The next one comes from Overseas Bills fan who says, if the Bills do roster Matt Haack as the holder, then what position would most likely have a player less suit up? Or is it more game-specific depending on matchups or players carrying injury? So, yes, he has a second part to his question. Let's stop there. Yes, it is going to be matchup specific. That is dictated by injuries and who the Bills are playing. But right off the bat, I look at linebacker. I thought the Bills have carried too many linebackers in recent years. And if they were going to do that crazy thing and keep Matt Haack to be the holder, I think that's where you look to cut a player that you have typically rostered in the past. Overseas Bills fan continues and says, also, do you think that the drafting of Matt Araiza might change how aggressive the Bills are in games? A lot of fans, myself included, enjoyed it when McDermott was aggressive in his fourth down calls, but I think a lack of confidence in Matt Haack would have played into that, with the possibility to pin the opponents deep in their own half, even and win the field position battle. Will we see fewer go-for-it attempts on fourth down this season? I got to be completely honest with you. I understand the question, but I don't think the punter has anything to do with this. The reason the Bills are aggressive on fourth down is because Josh Allen's a quarterback, and he's one of the best football players in the world. That's why you go for it on fourth down, or don't go for it on fourth down. It's because you have 17 at quarterback. It doesn't matter who the punter is. If anything, what Matt Hawk really brings is the ability, what Matt Araiza, not Matt Hawk, Matt Araiza, what he brings is that ability to flip the field. When you have to punt backed up in your own territory, he gives you an opportunity to hit a booming punt and really flip the field position. He's not even a good control punter. That's not even his game. So if Sean McDermott wants to pin teams back, he doesn't even have a good punter for that right now in Matt Araiza. He's got to grow in that area. So I think the fourth down aggressiveness is always tied to Josh Allen and has nothing to do with who the punter is. The next one comes from Ian, who says, now that we're through the draft in the first wave of free agency, I was curious your thoughts on the kick return, punt return situation. What would you handicap the odds for regarding who will win the job? Based on your personal evaluation of his tape, do you think Khalil Shakir has the inside track to have both jobs over Isaiah McKenzie or Marquez Stevenson? Do you think he is at all a threat to score on any given play in either department? Good question here. I think the favorite to be the punt returner is Khalil Shakir. I think the favorite to be the kick returner might be Marquez Stevenson. And what this comes down to for me is Khalil Shakir comes into the NFL with nearly 50 return opportunities at Boise State, including fair catches, which matter. He had 2 muffs his very first season at Boise State, none since. I think he's got great hands, great body control, good yards after catch ability, which translates well to being a punt returner. He's also extremely tough. He has great concentration. I think that's going to be a strength of his game. I think he can immediately be the Bills' punt returner. As far as kick returns go, I thought Marquez Stevenson, one of the best things that he did at Houston was kick return. And I'd like to see him get a chance to kind of evolve in that role. And so I do think you could see these roles split up for the first time in a long time with the Bills. Dave says, any thoughts on the team taking the highly athletic, highly recruited SEC players like Kyer Elam and James Cook? It's what I've wanted, and it's against what they've typically done. Coincidence or a change in philosophy over at One Bills Drive, in your opinion? Love this question because you've heard me talk all about how the Bills historically don't draft players from the SEC. And even with a couple of players this year, their rate of drafting SEC players is extremely low. And we've talked about it. I think the Bills want players that have earned everything that they have and have been doubted in life and want to come in with a chip on their shoulders. Well, they get a couple of high recruits out of the SEC and Kyer Elam and James Cook with their first 2 picks. I don't think this is a major change in philosophy, but what this is a great example of something that shifts as the Bills hit different points in their life cycle as a team. The priorities that existed in 2017 and 2018 and 2019 are different than the priorities today. Your roster is at a point now where you can deviate a little bit and bring in those types of players because you have a great infrastructure. You're coming into Buffalo as a rookie. That's going to be humbling for you walking into that facility with that quarterback, with that coaching staff, and that roster. You better be hungry or else you're not going to play. The same might not have been true 4 years ago. And so I think those principles shift a bit as the Bills reach different points in their life cycle as a team. And so the environment is a lot more ripe for the Bills to be more willing to bring in these highly regarded recruits from the SEC, where in the past they typically haven't done that. That's what I think this comes down to. The next one comes from Dan. This is a fun question. Dan says, you brought up teams busting players more often than players busting teams. I was wondering if you could put that into the context of Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. Without having half the fan base marching down to the Carolinas with torches and pitchforks, can you please speak to the possibility of the Bills drafting and trying to develop either Baker Mayfield or Sam Darnold? Would Josh have had this much success with the Browns or Jets? Fantastic question. We could probably do an entire podcast on this. The first thing that I want to say here as I dive into this is, and this is something I've repeatedly said, the person most responsible for Josh Allen's development and him reaching elite status in the NFL at quarterback is Josh Allen. Now, it's been a benefit to him to have the same offensive coordinator for his first 4 seasons. It's been a benefit to him to play in Buffalo, where the culture is good and the organization is sound, and they've done a great job of building around him. But Josh Allen's the one who's most responsible for his development. He's worked his ass off to get to this point. So give him the most credit for where he's at as a player. Now, I do believe that Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold would be better players had they come to Buffalo. There's no question. Because I think that same stability, the things that benefited Josh Allen, would be in place for those quarterbacks. But how much ownership would they have taken? Would they have taken the same level of ownership that Josh Allen did? I don't know. But they would have had a much better chance of succeeding in Buffalo. Now, neither is as talented as Josh Allen, not even close. Those players wish they had Josh's size and arm talent and mobility. They can't come close. So that's a big differentiating thing. So I think they would be better players than they've turned out to be. But I'm not going to sit here and say that Baker or Sam would be elite players if they would just have been drafted to Buffalo. And then would Josh have this much success with the Browns or Jets? I think Josh might not be the player he is today, but I think maybe he's 2019 Josh Allen with those teams. And they'd be much better off. It really, I think the complementary piece of how they built around him and the stability that they would have provided would have been different. And those things affect quarterback development. And so, no, I don't think Josh would be quite as good if he went to a different team. And I think those other quarterbacks would be much better if they came to the Bills. Summer is coming, and with summer, you're going to need to have some food on the go. Built Bars are the perfect snack to take with you on family vacations. Throw them in your bags and your kids' backpacks, wherever you want to put them, to make sure that everyone has a bar so that you're fueled for your summer adventures. The best part about Built Bars, they're healthy and delicious. No more sacrificing delicious food for health. With Built Bar, you can have both, and it's easy. All you have to do is go to Built.com and order now. They've got Built Bars. They've got Puffs. Puffs are awesome. They're covered in 100% real chocolate. That means you can eat healthy and actually enjoy doing it. And if you haven't tried the Puffs, you got to try them. I'm crazy about these Puffs. They come in crazy flavors like banana cream pie and even churro. Who doesn't want a protein bar that tastes like a churro? And they're only 140 calories. Sign me up. And if that's not your favorite flavor, no worries. Then try a mix box. You can try 12 flavors of bars and Puffs. Built Bar makes sure there is something for everyone. Got a deal for you? Go to Built.com. Use promo code LOCKED15. You'll get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, let's get to some more questions here today. The next one comes from James, who says, what veteran is happiest about how the draft went, and who is the most scared about how the draft went? Good question. The happiest, I think, is Tommy Sweeney, where he's the favorite to be rostered and the tight end 3 this year. The Bills didn't draft the tight end, and that gives him a very clear path to getting that job if the Bills do roster 3 tight ends. So he's got to be the happiest. The most scared, I'd say, I'm going to go with Dane Jackson. And Dane Jackson's still going to make the team. I still think he'll be a quality depth player. But the Bills just traded up for Kyer Elam in the first round. This guy's going to start, which means Dane Jackson's probably not. Unless, Trey White needs a little bit more time coming back from the injury. But Dane Jackson went from penciled in starter to you got to beat out a first round pick that the team traded up for. I think he's got to be the most scared. Next one comes from Carlin, who says, hey, Joe, I have a herd mentality question for you. Any insight as to why Isaiah Spiller fell as far as he did in the draft? Was surprised to see him not picked until 123 by the Los Angeles Chargers. I know you had a higher grade on him than a lot of other analysts, so I was curious to hear your thoughts. Go Bills. Fair question, and I inadvertently talked about this already on the podcast. The reason he fell is because he doesn't have a dynamic athletic profile, and he's got some fumbling issues. His fumble rate's a little higher than you want it to be. Now, we've seen fumble issues go away in the NFL for guys that had some problems in college, so I'm optimistic there. But I think teams gravitated more towards the backs that had a more explosive athletic profile. I think he's going to be perfect for the Chargers. He's going to allow Austin Eckler to do the things Austin Eckler does more as a perimeter runner, as a satellite back, a guy who can get the football in space. And Isaiah Spiller can be the banger between the tackles. I think it's a great situation for him, and I think he'll be very productive. But the reason I think he fell is because of fumbling issues, and not necessarily having the most dynamic athletic skill set. Next one comes from Jake, who says, as always, thank you very much for your amazing Bills coverage 52 weeks a year. Thank you, Jake, and thanks for pointing out that we do this every week of the year. We're not going away. We're 5 days a week all year long. Overall, I was happy with the draft, but I have 2 questions for you. One, I think Cook can be a productive player on this team, but I'm concerned about his ability to run between the tackles at this level. Is this worry warranted? Was he a reach at pick 63? I thought the pre-draft rankings had him more as a late third-round guy. I am completely satisfied with James Cook not necessarily projecting well as a between-the-tackles runner in the NFL. He brings something different. He's that perimeter runner. He's a guy that's unbelievable as a receiving threat. I like those ways that he can help this football team. Now, when James Cook is on your roster, you're probably going to always want to make sure that you have a complementary player that does profile as a better between-the-tackles runner. But I like what Cook brings to the table. I think he's a perfectly fine pick at 63. That's nearly a third-round pick. It's like one of the last 2 picks in the second round. But when you consider the Bills and where they are as a football team in their life cycle, a Super Bowl contender, you're looking for X factors. And that's what James Cook is. They found out that Devin Singletary can carry the load. He can work between the tackles. Now they have a guy that they can throw the football to and use as a true perimeter threat. I love that. The second question from Jake was, it was undeniably stupid for Sauce Gardner to make those comments about Diggs. Do you think Bean inadvertently gave bulletin board material to all of the other draftees taken after Elam when Bean said Elam was the last player he had with a first-round grade on? So let's talk about those comments that Sauce Gardner made, because I really don't take much exception with them. I think this is overblown May NFL talking points that don't matter. So Sauce Gardner, before the draft, was asked about the possibility of getting picked by the Jets, playing in the AFC East, and having to deal with Steph Diggs, in addition to Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. And asked about his ability to match up with those guys. He said, most definitely, I feel really good. I feel like I can go against the best easily. Who cares? Who cares that he said that? If he said something different, we should be concerned. If the roles were reversed, if Kyer Elam was asked, how do you feel about matching up with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, I would hope he'd say, really good. I feel like I can go up against the best. You want that level of confidence in your cornerback. When Trey White met Kyer Elam, based on the videos that we saw from BuffaloBills.com, what's the first thing Trey White said to Kyer Elam? Don't lose your edge. These are exactly the responses I would hope Sauce Gardner would give. Yeah, I feel I can go easily against the best. You're a competitor. That's what you do. I mean, maybe you wish he said something more humble like, I'm looking forward to the opportunity to compete against great football players and something like that, I guess. But I don't know. I don't have any problems with this. I think this is completely overblown. Tyler says, I don't know if you researched this already, but given our draft picks, did Kyer Elam match up against Jalen Waddle when Florida played Alabama, and how did it go? So Kyer Elam played against Alabama in the 2020 SEC championship game when Jalen Waddle was on the Alabama offense. He was targeted one time when covering Jalen Waddle. He gave up one catch for 20 yards. So that was it. Only one target against his coverage from that game back in the 2020 SEC championship game. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us here today on the podcast. I certainly hope you enjoyed this. We've got some fun stuff coming up very soon on the podcast, the rest of this week, but also next week. A lot of you guys have asked me. One of the big herd mentality questions that I got was, what would you have done differently than Brandon Beane in this draft? And for those of you new to the podcast, every year, myself and Bruce Nolan from the Bruce Exclusive podcast, we've been doing this for multiple years now. We go through and say exactly what we would have done. And so that podcast is coming for you next week, where we will compare what we would have done to what Brandon Beane did. And we'll also go back and look at how we answered that for the last couple of drafts. So a lot of fun stuff coming your way here on the Locked On Bills podcast. Make sure you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to catching up with you again tomorrow.